Hi, welcome back to Arley Farm. Now, I must admit to you first of all that I'm stealing other ideas here. I'm stealing ideas meant for others. That's because one of my friends, Fury Machine Gaming, who does a lot of videos, um, he often starts his videos off with the line, welcome machine heads. And then AK, who also does YouTube videos and who I also recommend, both AK and Fury Machine Gaming do brilliant videos. Anyway, AK made the comment, on Fury's video, you're right, we are all machine heads on Farming Simulator because it's very much a game aimed at doing things using machinery. Normally things attached to the back of tractors or to the front of harvesters. And there's very little that actually gets done by hand on Farming Simulator. Now, I'm not trying to steal Fury Machine Gaming's opportunity to do a video on that if he wants to. But I thought it was such a good idea that I wanted to do a video on it too. So, thank you AK, thank you Fury Machine Gaming. I'm going to do this video on doing things by hand on Farming Simulator. Now, we'll start off with what I think is probably the most common thing to do by hand in this game. The mod that everybody has except me, and I'll explain why I don't. And that's the manual attach mod. And the manual attach mod, which is an absolutely great mod, and I highly recommend it. But what happens is every time you back up to a trailer or to a piece of farm equipment, you have to hop out here and you have to attach the hydraulic hoses manually. Okay. Now the reason I don't use the manual attach mod, even though I think it's a great mod and I highly recommend it, is because I use an Xbox speed wheel as my steering wheel. Okay. Now the advantage of the Xbox speed wheel is that games recognise as being an Xbox controller, not as a steering wheel, even though it is actually a steering wheel. So games that you can't use steering wheels with, it will still allow you to use the Xbox speed wheel. It also doesn't. There's a lot of games where it will let you use a steering wheel or a keyboard and mouse, but it's one or the other, because the Xbox speed wheel is recognised as a controller rather than a steering wheel. It doesn't cut out the use of keyboard and mouse. Now I use the keyboard for all the controls of doing different things, so like for example turning on my lights, I use keyboard for that. The advantage of using a keyboard for doing things is there's so many buttons, you can set every function to a different button and you don't run out of buttons too quickly. I use a mouse for both looking around like this and also for operating my forks on the front of tractors and things. I always use a mouse for that as well. And I use the steering wheel for my forward backwards on the tractor and also for my steering of said tractor and things. So plus of course I use it for my accelerator brakes. So I use the steering wheel for driving the tractors, the mouse for operating the forks and the looking around, and the keyboard for other functions. The disadvantage of the Microsoft Speed Wheel is it doesn't have a steering column attached to the steering wheel. It doesn't have a base. It is literally just a steering wheel, not attached to anything. There is no steering column on the wheel. You can Google Microsoft Speed Wheel or Xbox Speed Wheel being one word, if you want to see what it looks like. But it's basically just a U-shaped steering wheel, literally. Now the disadvantage, and really to me the only disadvantage of it, is when you jump out of a tractor, if your steering wheel is not absolutely perfectly straight, you get this. So you jump out of a tractor and you start crab walking sideways because your steering wheel is not quite perfectly straight. So therefore, because to use the manual attach, you're jumping in and out of the tractor all the time. I just find myself too often in a game jumping out of a tractor and starting to crab walk sideways like that. So I choose not to use the manual attach, just so I'm not doing too much crab walking in a game. But you probably will notice that sometimes in some of my videos where I'll jump out of a tractor or something and then start moving sideways and have to correct it, and that's because the steering wheel, the Microsoft Speed Wheel I'm doing. Now another thing that I do manually is the attaching and unattaching of these tension belts. And the reason I do it manually is because I'm loading and unloading my bales by hand here, using the, sorry, when I say by hand, I mean using the tractor there with the prongs, but I'm not using an auto load or auto unload function. Therefore, by unattaching the belts by hand, so let's say I unattach these and then I bump something, the worst that's going to happen is I'm going to have 4 bales, 4 in the back, fall off and have to pick those up. Again, I'm not going to lose a whole trailer load of bales falling over everywhere. And also adds to the realism doing these belts by hand. So that's something that I do. I know that you can like just jump in this tractor and then use the L button to attach all the belts, or unattach all the belts simultaneously. To me, that's not realistic enough. And also, I don't want all my belts undone. I only want the belts undone from the bales I'm actually trying to unload, or if I'm loading them up, I want to strap each lot of 4 as they're done. Okay, so the tension belts there is one of the big things that I do by hand. Another thing that I don't do by hand, and I'll explain why, is you've got the fertilizer spreaders here, and the same thing works with seeders as what I'm about to talk about with fertilizer spreaders. Okay, so if I hitched a tractor up to the front of this fertilizer spreader now and pressed R, it would start filling up with fertilizer from one of these sacks here. But again, I find that a wee bit unrealistic, so what I do instead is I go and use my big tractor to attach to this, and I use a smaller tractor to come in with and use the bale fork normally to pick up this sack here and actually hold the sack over the fertilizer spreader. Now, as I said, what I'm saying here, same thing applies to seeders. You can hold a bag of seed over the top of the seeder, and the door on the top of the seeder will open. Now, there is a mod that allows you to then open and close the opening on the bottom of these sacks by hand. Okay, so you jump out of the tractor and you turn it to get it to manually start doing, or turn it again, stop it. I'm not using that mod, which means as soon as the sack is over the top of the spreader, it starts emptying into the spreader. And the reason I'm not using that one is that it conflicts with another mod that I am using. Now, I know some basics when it comes to programming up mods and things, so if I want to change the load capacity of a trailer so it carries more or less than what the modder designed it to load, I can do that. If I want to change the price of a mod and make it more expensive or cheaper to buy, I can do that. If I want to change the working width of a mod, I can even do that. But that's about the limits to what I can do. So when I've got 2 mods that conflict against each other, I don't have the skills needed to work out what it is that's causing them to conflict and to fix it. So in that situation, I choose which of those 2 mods is more important to me to keep, which one do I think is the better one to have, and then I'll just discard the other one. So the mod that allows you to open and close the spout on the bottom of these sacks by hand, because that conflicts with another mod that I like, I choose not to have it because I like the other mod better. Okay? Now, while we're in the shed, we'll go on to the next thing I do by hand. I buy these single sacks of chicken feed like this, and each one holds 100 litres of chicken feed. And what I do is I pick it, I'm almost out at the moment, so I've just got to buy some more. But I normally buy them about 10 sacks at a time and just put them in stacks for about 5. I find if you go any higher than 5, they start to fall over. It's like bales, you know, if you start stacking the bales too high, they start falling over and things, so I only stack my bales too high. Like that, we'll only stack these sacks in piles of 5. So I'll buy 10 or 15 sacks at a time, I'll make 2 or 3 piles of 5 with them. But then what I do is I carry the sack by hand around to my chickens. Now you couldn't do this if you were doing a chicken farm with hundreds of chickens, so it would take too long at 100 litres per sack to fill this up. And what you do is you hold the sack over here and it empties into the grain trough there. Now the reason I haven't actually grabbed one this time is, as you can see, I've already got 731 litres of grain in there and I only hold 750. But I do feed the chickens by hand by bringing the grain sack around and holding it over the trough there. The reason you can only do that if you've only got a few chickens is, well, the reason I do it is, the reason I have chickens is I like the life in the farmyard. I always have a dog, even though the dog in this game is completely useless. It doesn't actually do anything whatsoever. I still like to have it because it adds life to my yard. I like the chickens for the same reason. I like the look of chickens just wandering around the yard like that, and that's why I use the open pastures mod, so I can, you know, have the chickens running all around the place. You know, you can see up there, I've got chickens up there. When we go around to the house, there'll be some chickens running around the house as well. They're all over my yard. So that's why I have the chickens. They're not really there because I want the eggs particularly. I wouldn't care if they weren't laying eggs. It really wouldn't worry me. But they're there just to add life to my farmyard. But since I've got them, I feed them by hand. Now if we come up here, so these gates should really open, but they don't. And again, my modding skills not good enough to make those gates open, so I just jump them instead. When I come up here, and this is I feed my dog by hand, and as I said to you, the dog doesn't actually do anything, but I like it because it just adds a bit more life to my farmyard. So I always feed my dog by hand, and when he turns up, which he should turn up now that I've just fed him, I can't see him at the moment. I normally, oh there he is, oh get off the dog kennel. I also pet him, which is another thing you can do by hand. Normally he'd be on the ground, not on the kennel, so there you go, now he's on the ground. Now I can show you how you pet him when he's actually on. If he sat still for a minute I could. You can also brush your horses by hand if you've got horses. Now I don't count riding the horses as being a by hand thing, because basically the way horses are done in this game is pretty much the same as if you're jumping on a motorbike or on a tractor. The same sort of controls really. You're just riding a horse instead. But when you go into what I call like the house paddock, I call it. I don't know what you call it in America. There's a chicken you see running around my yard, but a little grassed in or fenced in area here that your house is built on. Okay, in New Zealand that would be called your house paddock. I always like to mow that by hand, and here I have a hand mower to do it. Now this probably isn't the kind of hand mower you'd use, and to me this is a bit of a compromise. There is a hand mower mod you can download, but it does half a metre at a time, and yes, that's very, very realistic to only be mowing a strip of half a metre at a time, but it takes forever to mow a little yard like this, absolutely forever. So I don't want you to do one like that. As I said, I have the skill to be able to increase the mowing width. If you're pushing along a hand mower, it's mowing not just the lawn that it's running over, but also half a metre of lawn either side of the mower at the same time, it looks a bit stupid. So what I've done is I've chosen this mower as the hand mower, and I'll just show you. So you jump in it the same as you would in your vehicle. I normally use the third person view when mowing, and you can see you can just push the mower around and you can turn it on so it cuts. Now I've actually just mown these lawns, so I can't cut them again at the moment, they're just too short. But you can see how I can mow. Now it's mowing strips of 2 metres at a time, because that's how wide the little blade on the front there is. And that to me is a good compromise. It's narrow enough that it still takes you a wee bit of time to mow the lawns. It's not an instantaneous job type thing, but it's wide enough that it doesn't take you forever to do it. And I actually quite like the look of this mower, because the front blade there, it reminds me very, very much of 2 different things. Okay, one is if any of you have home hair clippers, like for doing home haircuts at home. I know in my household, the way it's always been is my wife cuts my hair for me. My wife also, when all the kids were living at home, all the boys in the family, which in the case of our family I only have one son, so she would cut his hair as well. But girls go to the hairdresser, not as often as they would like. If they want to go more often, then they wait until they're old enough to work and earn their own income, then they can spend their own money on going to the hairdressers as often as they want. But yeah, in our household the guys always got their haircuts at home using a home clipper set, similar to this mower at the front there, and women went to the hairdressers. The other thing this is reminiscent of to me, this blade, is if anyone's ever used an electric carving knife, like to carve up a nice roast lamb or something, same way it works. It's got 2 blades that sort of just, one of them stays still and the other one shimmies to the left and right, and because of the sharp edges on the blades, anything caught between those blades gets cut, whether it be lawns, people's hair, or a nice roast lamb. So yeah, I always mow my lawns around the house paddock area by hand as well, and it didn't matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't actually come up with anything else that I regularly do by hand in this game. So I strap and unstrap loads on trailers. I feed my dog and pet the dog. I mow the lawns in the house area, and I feed the chickens. And to be perfectly honest, oh, there is one other thing actually, which I'll just go back here and show you. Another mod that I've downloaded. Okay, so after using the mower to mow the lawns, you end up with the lawn bit that's left behind that you could bale up. Of course, when you're hand mowing your house paddock area here, you wouldn't be baling that up. So what I do instead is I use the broom here to sweep up the lawn clippings. I also use this broom in the milking shed because I don't like to use solid fertiliser. I find the solid fertiliser spreaders run out of fertiliser too quickly, and the spray that they're left with is actually the spraying width isn't wide enough, so I don't use solid fertiliser. I do use the liquid fertiliser, absolutely, but I don't use the solid. So when I've got cow poo in the milking shed, I just sweep that up with the same old broom. Now my wife always laughs when she sees me sweeping up the lawn clippings after I've mown the lawns here by hand using the broom. And personally, I would really love it if someone would come out with a mod. I mean, this broom works like a chainsaw. You turn the mouse wheel to arm it or disarm it, and use the left-hand mouse button to work it once it's armed like that. I'd love it if someone would do a rake mod, working exactly the same way as this broom, but make it a rake instead. So I could then go and rake the lawn clippings up instead of sweeping them with a broom. But alas, no one's done a rake mod like that yet, so I sweep my lawn clippings. And of course that does bring to mind one other thing you can do by hand, which is using the chainsaw. Now, I know that Fury Machine Gaming uses the chainsaw quite regularly. And I don't really do a lot of timber cutting. Occasionally, and this map's a good example, there's a tree further down this road that when the branches hung a wee bit low and you couldn't drive a combine harvester under it, you couldn't take a trailer full of bales, so I used a chainsaw and stood on the roof of a truck just to trim that one branch off. So I do sometimes use a chainsaw a wee bit just to trim trees that are in the way or something, but I don't really do forestry work, so therefore the chainsaw doesn't really get a lot of use with me like it might with some of you. But if any of you have other jobs that you do by hand apart from the tension straps on trailers, maybe the mowing of the house paddock lawns, and if you've never done that, give it a try. It's quite enjoyable. It's just another job to do on your farm, so it is something that's really enjoyable to do. Or chainsaws, or if you've got that broom mod, let me know what else you do by hand. It'd be interesting to hear. Okay, thank you all. Bye.